I never thought a dinner party would be the stage where my entire world collapsed and rebuilt itself in the span of a single breath. But life has a way of hiding the sharpest knives inside the softest moments. Let me take you back to that night. The night my son looked at me like I was nothing more than a servant in his own home. The night his fiancée grabbed my trembling hand and spoke words that made 30 people drop their forks in unison. The night my own blood chose his future in-laws over the father who raised him alone for 22 years. My name is David. I am 57 years old. And this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people you love the most are the ones waiting to burn you alive. It started, as these things often do, with a phone call I should have seen coming. My son, Michael, called me on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I was in the middle of fixing a leaky faucet in my small apartment, the kind of place I moved into after the divorce, the kind of place that still smells like loneliness no matter how many scented candles I burn. My hands were wet, my knees were sore from kneeling on the linoleum floor, and when I saw his name flash on my phone screen, my heart did that familiar leap it always does when my only child reaches out. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered on the second ring. "Hey Dad," Michael said, his voice casual, the kind of casual that usually comes right before a favor. I smiled because that's what fathers do. Even when we know we're being used, we smile. "Hey buddy, what's going on?" There was a pause on his end. I could hear noise in the background, probably his fiancée Amanda talking to someone, probably her mother, that woman who has looked at me like I was gum on her shoe every single time we've met. Michael cleared his throat and said, "So, Amanda's parents are hosting this dinner party on Saturday. Nothing huge, just family, close friends. Maybe 30 people." I waited because I knew there was more. And, well, they hired a catering company, but the chef backed out last minute. So we're in a bit of a bind. I still didn't speak because I wanted to see how long it would take for him to say it. "Dad," Michael finally said, "you used to cook for that Italian restaurant back in the day, right? You still know how to make all that stuff." I almost laughed. Back in the day. That phrase made it sound like I was a retired gladiator or a forgotten war hero. But yes, back in the day, when Michael was a little boy with scraped knees and a gap-toothed smile. I worked 12-hour shifts at a restaurant called Luigi's. I did that for 8 years while his mother was climbing the corporate ladder, while she was at business dinners and weekend retreats, while I was the one who packed his lunches and helped with his homework and showed up to every single parent-teacher conference with flour still on my shirt. "I know how to cook, son," I said quietly. "I haven't forgotten." "Great," he said, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "So listen, here's the plan. You come over Saturday around 2. Help us set up, get the food going. It's nothing fancy, just some pastas, a few appetizers, maybe a roast. Amanda's parents are paying for the ingredients, so don't worry about that. Don't worry about that." I wanted to say, "Son, do you hear yourself? You're asking your 57-year-old father to come cook for 30 people at your fiancé's parents' house like I'm some kind of hired help." I wanted to say, "When was the last time you even came to visit me? When was the last time you asked how I was doing without immediately following up with a request?" But I didn't say any of that because that's what fathers do. We swallow our pride. We tell ourselves that our children don't mean to hurt us, that they're just busy, that they'll appreciate us someday when they're older and wiser. We lie to ourselves because the alternative, admitting that the person you raised might not actually respect you, is too painful to carry. "Sure, buddy," I said. "I'll be there." He hung up without saying I love you. But he never says I love you anymore. Not since Amanda came into the picture 3 years ago. Not since her family, with their lake house and their German cars and their country club memberships, started treating my son like he was their son and treating me like I was some kind of embarrassing relic from a past they'd rather forget. Saturday arrived faster than I was ready for. I woke up at 5 in the morning because that's what happens when you get older. Sleep becomes a visitor who rarely stays the whole night. I lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the man I used to be and the man I had become. 22 years ago, when Michael's mother left us for her boss, a man with a bigger house and a thicker wallet, I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would never let my son feel abandoned. I promised that I would be both mother and father to him, that I would show up for every recital and every game and every late-night nightmare. I kept that promise. I worked double shifts. I said no to dates, to vacations, to anything that would take time away from being his parent. And now, at 57, with bad knees and a bad back and a heart that had been broken more times than I could count, I was getting ready to cook for 30 strangers so my son could impress his future in-laws. I got dressed in my best casual clothes, the ones without any stains or loose threads. Dark jeans, a clean button-down shirt, my good leather shoes that I only wear to funerals and weddings. I packed my knives, the ones I've had for 30 years, the ones that have followed me from that tiny apartment I shared with Michael's mother to this lonely place I call home now. I packed my apron, the one Michael gave me for Father's Day when he was 8 years old, the one with the faded cartoon chef on the front that says, "World's Best Dad." I drove 45 minutes to Amanda's parents' house. It was in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looks like a golf course and every mailbox costs more than my first car. The house itself was a sprawling modern thing with floor-to-ceiling windows and a front door that probably cost more than my entire rent for the year. I parked my 10-year-old sedan behind a row of luxury SUVs and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, just breathing. "You can do this," I told myself. "You're doing this for Michael." For Michael. I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. A housekeeper answered, a woman my age with tired eyes and a polite smile. She led me through a marble foyer into a kitchen that looked like something from a magazine. Stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, a refrigerator that probably had its own zip code. Amanda's mother, Patricia, was standing at the island, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I walked in, and I saw her eyes do that quick scan they always do, the one where she takes in my clothes, my shoes, my entire existence, and finds it all slightly beneath her. "David," she said, and her voice was like ice cubes clinking in a glass. "So glad you could make it. The kitchen is all yours. The ingredients are in the fridge. Dinner is at 7. Please try to have everything ready by then." She didn't ask if I needed help. She didn't offer me a glass of water or show me where the bathroom was. She just turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor like little hammers on a coffin. I stood there for a moment, alone in that giant kitchen, and I felt something cold settle into my chest. But I pushed it down. I pushed it down like I always do. I tied on my apron, the one my son gave me when he was 8, and I got to work. For the next 5 hours, I cooked. I made homemade pasta from scratch, the way my grandmother taught me when I was a boy. I made a slow-cooked ragu that simmered on the stove for 3 hours, filling that cold kitchen with the smell of garlic and tomatoes and love. I made roasted vegetables tossed in herbs from my own garden, the one I tend to on weekends because it gives me something to care for now that my son doesn't need me anymore. I made a tiramisu that required me to whip the mascarpone by hand because I couldn't find their electric mixer. I made bread from scratch, kneading the dough with my own 2 hands, remembering how Michael used to sit on the counter when he was little and press his tiny fingers into the dough while I pretended to be annoyed. Around 4 o'clock, Michael came into the kitchen. He was wearing a crisp blue shirt and expensive jeans, and he looked so much like his mother that it hurt to see him. He glanced around at the countertops covered in flour and dishes and half-prepared ingredients, and he said, "Wow, Dad, you really went all out." I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand and smiled at him. "Of course I did, buddy. It's for you." He nodded, but he wasn't really looking at me. He was looking at his phone, typing something, his thumbs moving fast. "Amanda wants you to use the serving platters in the dining room," he said without looking up. "They're in the cabinet above the wine fridge. And make sure you plate everything nicely, okay? Her mom is really particular about presentation. Make sure you plate everything nicely." I had been cooking for 5 hours straight. My feet were throbbing. My back was screaming. And my son, my only child, was giving me instructions like I was a caterer he'd hired off the internet. "Okay, Michael," I said. "I'll take care of it." He finally looked up at me, and for just a second, I thought I saw something soft in his eyes. Something that looked like the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares and whisper, "Daddy, I'm scared." But then Amanda called his name from the other room, and he was gone, and I was alone again. At 6:30, the guests started arriving. I could hear them through the kitchen door, the murmur of voices, the clink of glasses, the fake laughter of people performing happiness for one another. I kept cooking, kept plating, kept wiping down countertops. I was sweating through my shirt. My hands were wrinkled from washing dishes. I hadn't eaten anything all day. At 7 o'clock, Michael came back into the kitchen. His face was flushed, probably from the wine he'd been drinking. He looked at the spread I had prepared, the 4 courses of beautiful food arranged on silver platters, and he nodded. "Looks good, Dad. Okay, so here's what I need you to do. When I give you the signal, you're gonna start bringing the food out. But don't just drop it on the table. I need you to serve each person individually. Like, go around the table and serve everyone." Amanda's dad really values that old-school formality. I stared at him. "You want me to serve the food?" I asked. "Like a waiter?" Michael shrugged. "It's not that big of a deal, Dad. It's just for tonight. Please don't make this complicated. Don't make this complicated." I wanted to say, "Michael, I am your father. I changed your diapers. I taught you how to ride a bike. I sat by your hospital bed when you had pneumonia when you were 6 and I didn't sleep for 3 days. And now you want me to serve dinner to your girlfriend's family like I'm the help." But I didn't say any of that because that's what fathers do. We nod. We say okay. We carry the weight of our children's expectations even when that weight is crushing us into dust. "Okay, Michael," I said. "I'll serve the food." He didn't thank me. He just turned and walked back to the party. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, holding onto the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. I looked down at my apron, at the faded cartoon chef and the words "World's Best Dad." And for the first time in my life, I wondered if maybe I hadn't done such a great job after all. Maybe I had given my son everything and taught him nothing. Maybe I had been so focused on making sure he never felt abandoned that I forgot to teach him how not to abandon me. But there was no time for that now. The food was getting cold. The guests were waiting. So I grabbed the first platter, the one with the homemade bruschetta, and I walked through the kitchen door into the dining room. The room was beautiful. A long table covered in white linen, candles flickering, flowers arranged in crystal vases. 30 faces turned to look at me as I entered, and I felt the weight of their gaze like a physical thing. They were all dressed in expensive clothes, their jewelry sparkling in the candlelight. I saw Patricia, Amanda's mother, sitting at one end of the table, her husband Richard at the other. I saw Amanda herself, beautiful in a red dress, sitting next to Michael. And I saw all the other guests, aunts and uncles and family friends, people who had probably never worked a day of physical labor in their entire lives. I walked around the table, serving each person a portion of bruschetta. Some of them thanked me politely. Most of them didn't look at me at all. I was invisible. I was furniture. I was the old man in the apron who had been summoned to perform a service and then disappear back into the kitchen where I belonged. I went back and forth from the kitchen to the dining room 7 times. 7 trips. 7 courses. Each time I served the food, I cleared the plates, I refilled the water glasses. My back was on fire. My hands were shaking from exhaustion. And through it all, I smiled because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. Between the main course and dessert, I went into the kitchen to plate the tiramisu. I was alone again, standing at the counter, arranging the little cups on a silver tray. My vision was blurry from fatigue. I hadn't sat down in over 9 hours. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't even had a glass of water since noon. And then I heard the dining room door open behind me. I turned around, expecting Michael or maybe Patricia with another instruction. But it wasn't either of them. It was Amanda. She walked into the kitchen slowly, her red dress swishing against the floor. Her eyes were fixed on me, and there was something in her expression that I couldn't quite read. It wasn't hostility. It wasn't gratitude. It was something else, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "David," she said softly. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" I set down the spoon I was holding and wiped my hands on my apron. "Of course, Amanda. What is it?" She walked closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and expensive. She looked at my apron, at the faded cartoon chef, and then back at my face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Something that looked almost like guilt. "I need to tell you something," she said. "And I need you to listen without interrupting. Can you do that?" I nodded, confused. She took a deep breath. And then she reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. Or maybe my fingers were cold. I couldn't tell anymore. I was so tired, so drained, so emptied out by the events of the day that I could barely feel anything at all. But I felt her hand in mine, small and soft, and I waited. "David," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need you to know something before dinner ends. I need everyone to know." "What are you talking about?" I asked. She squeezed my hand tighter. And then she said the words that would change everything. "Let's go back to the dining room," she said. "And please just stay by my side. Don't let go of my hand." I didn't understand what was happening. My brain was too foggy, too exhausted, too beaten down by the events of the day to process what she was asking. But something in her voice, something raw and desperate, made me follow her. She led me out of the kitchen, through the door, and into the dining room where 30 people sat waiting for dessert. And then she stopped. She stopped right in the middle of the room, right in front of the long table, right in front of her parents, right in front of Michael. She was still holding my hand, and everyone was staring at us. "Amanda," Michael said, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. "What are you doing?" She didn't look at him. She looked at me, and then she turned to face the room. "I have an announcement to make," she said. Her voice was steady now, strong in a way I had never heard before. "And I need everyone to listen very carefully." Patricia set down her wine glass with a sharp click. "Amanda, what is the meaning of this? This is highly inappropriate." Amanda ignored her. She took a breath, squeezed my hand one more time, and then she spoke. "For the past 3 years," she said, "I have watched this man, David, be treated like a servant in his own son's life. I have watched him cook and clean and serve and smile while everyone in this room looked right through him." The room went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "I have watched my fiancé, Michael," she continued, "ask his father to work like a hired caterer at our engagement dinner. I have watched my mother refuse to make eye contact with him because she thinks he's beneath us." Patricia's face went pale. Richard started to stand up, but Amanda held up her hand. "I'm not finished," she said. And then she turned to face Michael, who was staring at her with his mouth open. "Michael," she said, "do you know how many nights David has called me? Not to ask for anything, not to complain, just to check on me, to ask how my day was, to tell me he was proud of me for getting that promotion at work. Do you know how many times he has shown up at my apartment with homemade soup when I was sick? Do you know how many times he has remembered my birthday when my own parents forgot?" "Amanda," Michael said, his voice shaking, "what are you doing? Stop this." But she didn't stop. She turned back to the room, her eyes blazing now. "This man," she said, pointing at me with her free hand, "raised his son alone for 22 years after his wife left him. He worked double shifts. He sacrificed everything. He gave up his dreams so that Michael could have a chance at his own. And what does he get in return? He gets to stand in a hot kitchen for 9 hours and serve dinner to a room full of people who wouldn't even notice if he dropped dead." Silence. Total, complete silence. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was closed. My eyes were burning. 30 people were staring at me, and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stand there holding Amanda's hand like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. And then Michael stood up. His chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet room. His face was red, his eyes wide, his fists clenched at his sides. He looked at Amanda, then at me, then back at Amanda. And when he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "You're choosing him?" he said. "Over me? At our engagement dinner? In front of my parents?" Amanda looked at him, and I saw something harden in her face. Something that looked like the end of love. "I'm choosing what's right," she said. "And if you can't see how you've been treating your own father, Michael, then maybe you're not the man I thought I was going to marry." Michael made a sound, something between a laugh and a growl. He grabbed his jacket off the back of his chair and started for the door. But before he left, he turned to look at me one last time. His eyes were filled with something I had never seen before. Hatred. Pure, unfiltered hatred aimed at the man who had raised him. "You did this," he said to me. "You ruined everything." And then he walked out the door and slammed it behind him. The room erupted. Patricia was shouting at Amanda. Richard was on his phone, probably calling Michael. The guests were murmuring to each other, their faces a mix of shock and confusion and barely concealed delight at the drama unfolding before them. But I didn't hear any of it. All I could hear was the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears. Amanda turned to me. Her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. A real smile, not the polite one she wore at family dinners. "David," she said softly, "I'm sorry you had to find out like this. But someone had to say something. Someone had to stand up for you." I looked down at our hands, still intertwined. And then I looked back at her face. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you do this? You just lost him. You just lost your fiancé, your family. Why?" She shook her head, and a tear slid down her cheek. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible," she said. "Because my parents have made me feel that way my whole life. And when I met you, when I saw how kind you were to me, how you treated me like a daughter when my own mother wouldn't even hug me, I realized that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. And David, you have shown up for me more times than anyone in this room ever has." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to process any of this. One moment I was a servant in a kitchen. The next I was the center of a family explosion that had just destroyed my son's engagement. But as I stood there in that beautiful dining room, surrounded by shocked faces and broken china and the lingering smell of my grandmother's ragu, I felt something shift inside me. Something that had been buried for a very long time. I felt seen. And I realized in that moment that sometimes the people we think are against us are actually the ones fighting hardest in our corner. Sometimes the betrayal we fear comes from the hand we least expect. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe sends us an ally in the most unlikely package. I let go of Amanda's hand. I walked over to the kitchen, untied my apron, and folded it carefully. The world's best dad. I looked at those words for a long moment, and then I hung the apron on the back of a chair and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. In the weeks that followed, Michael didn't speak to me. He didn't answer my calls, didn't respond to my texts, didn't acknowledge my existence. Patricia called me once, screaming about how I had ruined her daughter's reputation and destroyed their family's perfect image. I listened for a while and then I hung up. Amanda came to see me a few days after the dinner. She showed up at my apartment with a bottle of wine and a bag of groceries. And she cooked me dinner in my tiny kitchen while we talked about everything and nothing. She told me that she had been planning to break up with Michael for months, that she had seen the way he treated me and the way he treated her and the way he treated anyone who couldn't offer him something in return. She told me that the dinner party was supposed to be her last attempt to see if he would change, if he would treat me with the respect I deserved. And when he didn't, when he asked me to serve the food like a waiter, something inside her snapped. "I should have said something sooner," she said, stirring the sauce on my stove. "I should have stood up for you before it got to that point." I told her it wasn't her responsibility to stand up for me, that I was a grown man, that I should have stood up for myself. But she shook her head and said, "Sometimes the people we love need someone else to be brave for them. That's not weakness. That's just being human." A month later, Michael called me. It was 3 in the morning, and I was half asleep when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me, the part that will always be his father no matter what he does, made me pick up. "Dad," he said. His voice was thick, slurred, like he'd been drinking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. "Where are you, Michael?" I asked. "Are you okay?" He laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "I'm at a bar. I've been at a lot of bars lately. Amanda won't talk to me. Her parents won't talk to me. My job is falling apart because I can't focus on anything. And I just keep thinking about that night. About what I did to you." I didn't say anything. I let him talk. "I was so embarrassed," he said. I was so embarrassed that my fiancée chose you over me in front of everyone. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that she didn't choose you over me. She chose decency over cruelty. She chose kindness over pride. And I was too blind to see it. He was crying now. I could hear it in his voice, the way it cracked and broke. "Dad," he said, "I treated you like garbage. I treated you like a servant. And you just took it. You just smiled and took it because that's what you've always done. You've taken everything from Mom leaving to me being a terrible son. And you never once complained. Why didn't you ever complain?" I closed my eyes. "Because you were my son," I said. "And I thought if I just kept showing up, eventually you would see me." I heard him take a shuddering breath. "I see you now, Dad. I see you." We talked for 3 hours that night. We talked about his childhood, about his mother leaving, about all the ways I had tried to be enough for him and all the ways I had failed. We talked about Amanda, about how much he had loved her and how much he had lost. We talked about the future, about what kind of man he wanted to become. And when the sun started to rise, painting my bedroom in shades of orange and pink, Michael said something that made me cry for the first time in years. "Dad," he said, "can I come over for dinner? And can you teach me how to make that pasta? The one Grandma taught you." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and smiled into the phone. "I'd like that, buddy. I'd like that a lot." He came over the next Sunday. He showed up at my apartment with a bottle of wine and a bag of groceries, just like Amanda had done. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered, but there was something different in his eyes, something softer. He hugged me when he walked through the door, really hugged me, and I felt the last of the ice in my chest start to melt. We spent the afternoon in the kitchen. I taught him how to make the pasta, how to knead the dough until it was smooth and elastic, how to roll it out thin enough to see your hand through. He was clumsy at first, his fingers too stiff, his movements too quick. But after a while, he started to relax. He started to laugh. He started to tell me stories about his childhood, things I had forgotten, little moments that had slipped through the cracks of my memory. "Remember when you used to let me stand on a chair and stir the sauce?" he asked, his hands covered in flour. "And I always splattered it everywhere and you pretended to be mad but you never actually were?" I laughed. I remember everything," he said quietly. "I just forgot how much it mattered." We ate dinner together at my small kitchen table, just the two of us. The pasta was good, not perfect, but good. And as we sat there, talking and laughing and filling the silence with the sounds of a family healing, I thought about the dinner party, about the moment Amanda took my hand and spoke the truth into a room full of people who didn't want to hear it. She had given me back something I didn't even know I had lost. She had given me my voice. As for Michael and Amanda, they didn't get back together. Some things break in ways that can't be fixed. But they found a way to be civil, to move forward, to build separate lives that didn't include each other. And Amanda still comes to visit me sometimes. She calls me Dad now. She says it without hesitation, without irony, like it's the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it is. Because family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. It's about who holds your hand in the middle of a room full of people who want you to disappear. It's about who sees you when everyone else looks right through you. I learned that night that love doesn't always come from where you expect it. Sometimes it comes from a girl in a red dress, standing in a beautiful dining room, risking everything she had to defend an old man in a flour-stained apron. Sometimes love looks like a betrayal. Sometimes betrayal looks like love. And sometimes the person you thought was the villain turns out to be the only one brave enough to tell the truth. I still have that apron. The one Michael gave me when he was 8 years old. The one with the faded cartoon chef and the words, "World's Best Dad." I don't wear it anymore. It hangs on a hook in my kitchen. A reminder of who I was and who I became. A reminder that being a father isn't about being served. It's about serving. It's about showing up. It's about loving so deeply and so completely that you're willing to be invisible if that's what your child needs. But it's also about knowing when to stop being invisible. It's about knowing that you deserve to be seen, that you deserve to be respected, that you deserve to sit at the table instead of just serving it. Michael is better now. He's in therapy, working through the things he buried for so long. He calls me every Sunday. We have dinner together twice a month, sometimes at his apartment, sometimes at mine. He's learning to cook. He's learning to be a better man. And me? I'm learning too. I'm learning that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. That it's never too late to let yourself be seen. That the people who love you will hold your hand when you're too tired to hold it yourself. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Michael will ever truly forgive himself for the way he treated me. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive myself for letting him. But I know one thing for certain. That dinner party didn't destroy my family. Saved it. Because sometimes the thing that breaks you is the same thing that puts you back together. Sometimes the worst night of your life is the beginning of everything you were too afraid to become. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, someone will take your hand when you least expect it and speak the truth into a room full of lies. That someone was Amanda, and I will be grateful to her for the rest of my life. If you're watching this and you're a parent who feels invisible, who feels used, who feels like your children have forgotten all the sacrifices you made, I want you to hear something. You are not invisible. You are not worthless. You are not a servant. You are the foundation upon which someone's entire life was built. And foundations deserve respect. They deserve honor. They deserve to be seen. And if the people you built your life around can't see that, then maybe it's time to let someone else hold your hand. Because you never know. The person standing beside you in the kitchen might be the one who saves you. The person holding your hand might be the one who sets you free. And the truth, no matter how painful, will always be the thing that finally lets you breathe.